So what is your understanding of IAC? Infrastructure as a code. So instead of creating the resources manually, we need to provision the resources automatically. Say, is it a developer kind of job role or admin job role? As the name suggests, infrastructure as a code is a developer job role or admin job role. Okay, so this is like the job role of a DevOps engineer who is having some admin background. This is not developer background job. Okay, so now here we are going to discuss like one of the most powerful infrastructure automation tool called as Terraform. And today every infrastructure admin required or DevOps engineer required very good hands-on experience on the Terraform. Okay, so that should be one of the mandatory skill today we required. And Terraform is an open source like a IAC tool, like what is going to create the resources in any of the cloud or mostly like on premises like VMware, OpenStack. We can control Docker, Kubernetes, databases, MySQL, PostgreSQL. Like there are more than 1,000+ providers we have. But as of now, we are going to discuss with the AWS, we are going to provision. And the company who developed the Terraform is, HashiCorp. Okay, HashiCorp is the company who developed Terraform. Okay, and what is the scripting is using YAML or JSON? It's not YAML or JSON. They have their own domain-specific
HCL.
language that's called as HCL. HCL stands for HashiCorp configuration language. That's also very simple, like a declarative kind of language. Very simple, like a language we can use. Instead of manually creating the resources, okay, we're just writing the code. We are getting a lot of reusability by using those Terraform. Okay, so then like in the Terraform, first what we need to do is like we need to configure that Terraform. Okay, and if you are using AWS also, then AWS CLI also is mandatory. Okay, then like we need to write the code, the Terraform configuration code we need to do, then plan, then apply. So we need to plan, then need to apply that. Okay, so what we need to do with that is like writing the code, and we need to like validate all these also we need to perform. Then plan will show the blueprint of whatever the resources are getting provision, and apply is going to create the resources. Apply is going to create the resources. Okay, so we'll discuss even for the, so just like yesterday we have the template, right? Here we are going to write the code. Okay, and the once you install the Terraform command line tool is Terraform. So like in the AWS CLI, AWS is the command line tool. So now here most of the commands we are going to use, Terraform is the command line tool we have. From the Terraform command line tool, we are going to make sure. Okay, so some of the important Terraform commands also we'll discuss. Okay, and mostly we are going to keep all that in the code, we are going to keep the code in main.tf file we are going to keep. In the main.tf file, we are going to keep the data. So in the main.tf, we are going to keep that data. We are going to keep whatever the resources we want to keep. Mostly we are keeping in a file called main.tf. Okay. Mostly in the directory, we are going to keep that. Okay. So mostly we are going to keep. Okay. So the main benefits of the Terraform with the compared to other, like we have ARM templates, or we have Terraform, AWS CloudFormation. Okay, it supports multi-cloud and even hybrid also. Means we have VMware, vCloud, OpenStack, this kind of cloud also it is supporting. Okay, so then like even very powerful modules are there. So we have the powerful modules have been provisioned. Okay, and we have like a good collaboration with the remote backends. So that's all like we have the advantages we'll discuss. Okay, so these like we have the advantages. We can integrate even with the pipelines also. Then coming to the Terraform, like what first we need to understand is what is the Terraform provider. So we need to understand Terraform provider. Okay, that is we need to understand what are the Terraform providers we have. So Terraform is an open source company developed by HashiCorp. Okay, so what is the Terraform is going to do is like those are the plugins which like a service provider it need to use. So now here Terraform in our scenario want to use AWS or Azure or GCP, then like to the Terraform, those are the providers. So now I want to provision a resource in AWS, then Terraform required AWS provider. The provider is the plugin that Terraform is going to use and is going to communicate with the different providers. That is going to act as a bridge. Now the Terraform is going to communicate with the AWS provider. And who developed that AWS provider code? Who is going to develop that? Say Terraform is going to develop that. Okay, so now here try to understand. So now here we have Terraform. The end user is going to use very simple HCL kind of script. The backend we have the providers. Mostly the providers have been developed on top of Go language. Okay, so this is also developed by HashiCorp itself. After this, after that, what is going to happen? Like it's going to use the AWS SDK. It's going to use. It's going to use the AWS SDK. And that SDK is going to create the resources. So what is our responsibility? Are we going to develop those providers? Our responsibility is that it's here in this, we are going to keep that main.tf file we are going to keep. Okay, then we need to configure AWS CLI wise. We are going to configure the credentials also. That means we have the IAM access key and the secret key we are going to generate, right? These keys we are going to keep it. Then like that provider is acting as a bridge. Okay, we are using AWS provider. Then it's going to communicate with the AWS SDK. It's going to communicate. So with the AWS SDK, it's going to communicate and using the AWS SDK is going to provision those resources. Then here, who is developing those providers? Who is developing those providers? AWS is developing or Terraform is developing?
Terraform.
Terraform is developing like this, not only for AWS, they have developed for Azure, they develop for GCP, they develop for Ali Cloud, Oracle Cloud, VMware Cloud, Kubernetes. There are more than 1,000 plus providers. For DigitalOcean, okay, so like this, the Terraform is responsible to provide those providers. Terraform is responsible to provide those providers. Okay, so using which language they have developed, HCL or Go language?
Go language.
Go language. Providers are developed on Go language, but we are using HCL. And that HCL file, what are the extensions we are keeping? What are the
.tf.
.tf, mostly the not main itself, but any of the .tf file we are going to keep. So now, like here we are going to, I hope this flow is fine, right, for us. Like if it is Azure, then Azure provider, if Terraform users, then Azure authentication, then it's going to communicate. And the provider will have their own authentication method, and we have the set of resources and data sources. Now here, if we go for the Terraform, Terraform is supporting more than 1,000 plus some resources are available in the AWS, and data sources also is available. So now here in the provider, we have all that declarative updates, how we are going to create the resources and data sources we have. So how that resources and data sources are going to be created. So that's we are going to specify. That's we are going to specify, and using that providers is going to communicate. Okay, and definitely we require the authentication or not. Authentication is required, then it's going to communicate. Then that is going to communicate with those, say using the IAM access key and the secret key, we are going to communicate and we are going to provision the resources. We are going to provision the resources. Okay. So that's finally the provider is communicating with. Finally, that like a provider is communicating with the AWS SDK. With the AWS SDK, it is going to provide. So AWS SDK is going to provide that. Okay, so now try to assume. So we need to keep that main.tf in one directory or folder we are creating. In this, we are keeping that main.tf. In that, we need to specify which provider we need to use. When we do the Terraform init, so the first command what we need to type is Terraform init. So what the Terraform init will do is, so Terraform init will download that providers we have. Okay, so now here we have AWS is one provider. Okay, say here we have the different providers. We have AWS, Azure, RM is the provider for Azure, Google is the provider for GCP. Google is the provider name. So we are using AWS provider we are going to use. Okay, so then once we provision these resources, okay, so we need to do the Terraform init. So Terraform init we need to perform. So what Terraform init will do is, so Terraform init will initialize the workspace. The directory is going to become the Terraform workspace. Okay, so then it is initialize the directory into the working directory and all the Terraform configuration files, all it is going to read. And from that, what is the provider we have specified? It is going to download that Terraform provider. Okay, so that means in our main.tf we specify I'm going to use AWS provider. Okay, so Terraform init will download provider, and from where its download is from the Terraform registry is going to download. So Terraform registry is a repo kind of thing that's going to download that from the Terraform registry. Okay, it's going to download that which provider we have used. That provider code has been written by HashiCorp and they kept that in the Terraform registry. If you are using AWS, then AWS provider would be downloaded. If you use Azure, Azure RM provider is going to download. If you don't have that provider code, main.tf doesn't have the main.tf doesn't have the capability to communicate with AWS SDK. So that is the reason we required. Okay, so that provider need to be downloaded and which version it want, all those also is going to download. Once we download that directory, it's going to initialize the state file also or backend. So what is this we'll discuss. Okay, and it will prepare the directory also, that all that it's going to prepare that directory. That directory is going to become our Terraform working directory is going to prepare. It's going to prepare that Terraform directory. Like it's going to initialize the backend, initialize the provider plugins, and once the Terraform has been successfully initialized, is going to authenticate, then we are going to like provision. Okay, so Terraform init we need to do, and once we write the code, we can check the syntax check, these kind of things with the Terraform validate. The Terraform validate will show any of the syntax issues. So those kind of issues we can check it with the Terraform validate. So once we done the Terraform validate, then we can do any alignment issues we have. We can use FMT. FMT will do the format kind of thing. Okay, then like after this Terraform init, Terraform validate, Terraform FMT, we are going to do Terraform plan. So what Terraform plan will do is, Terraform plan is going to show the Terraform plan is going to show the Like whatever the resources, that resources are not getting provisioned. Okay, so Terraform plan is a dry run kind of thing. That means it shows the blueprint of whatever the resources are going to create. Okay, so that's going to show like so what plan is going to do is going to read our configuration files. Those configuration files are having the extension of .tf. Okay, then like it's going to show the blueprint of resources. So these all the resources are getting provisioned. That's going to show for us. Okay, so maybe a summary of these resources are getting provisioned like that is going to show. Then when we do the Terraform apply, the actual resources are getting created. So when we do the Terraform apply, the actual resources are getting created. Okay, so that's we need to do the Terraform apply. We need to do. So when we do the Terraform apply, the actual resources are getting created. So then, like it's going to create even all those details. Also, is going to store in one file called as state file. So among all these commands, okay, when the provider is getting downloaded, when the provider is going to download
Terraform init.
Terraform.
8.
Terraform init is going to be available. Okay. So then, so what is the Terraform like validate is going to do? What is validate is going to show is any syntax kind of issues, all those would be validate will show. Format, any of the alignment issues are there, format will do. And Terraform plan will show the blueprint or summary of the resources. Okay, that summary of the resources is shown by Terraform plan. Then what Terraform apply will do?
It will create the
It will create the resources. And with which command the state file is getting created?
Terraform apply.
Yeah, with the Terraform apply itself, that state file is also is getting created. And the name of the state file is the Terraform dot tf state. So Terraform.tf state. By default, if you don't configure any of the state file thing, by default in the local directory itself is going to store where we have stored that details. Okay, so all our configuration files, what we kept in that location itself is going to store. Okay, but that's not a best practice in the multi-developer kind of or multi-DevOps environment. That is the reason we are going to configure the remote backend. In our scenario, we are using S3 buckets for that purpose. Okay, so we are not storing locally that state file. We are keeping in a remote location. That's called as we need to configure the remote backend. And that's we are going to call that as S3 bucket. We are going to specify that S3 bucket. We are going to specify for this. Okay. So can you tell me the life cycle of the commands, whatever we have? So whatever the lifecycle commands we have, can you specify those? So we have the Terraform init,
Terraform validate.
Terraform validate, Terraform fmt, plan, apply.
Apply.
Okay. So then here we have one more powerful command is there. The Terraform state. So state whatever the resources have been created, that state file we can read it. Or Terraform destroy. Say the cloud formation stack, we can delete that stack, right? Here, if we delete that Terraform stack, sorry, Terraform destroy, then all the resources are getting deleted. Okay, so Terraform destroy will delete those resources. Yeah, any doubts on this? Okay, so then what are the steps we need to do is, they go to any of the Linux instance. So it would be in your home directory, right? mkdir my Terraform kind of thing. Then cd that my Terraform. Okay, then need to install AWS CLI. Once you install AWS CLI, we need to configure AWS configure. Okay, if we don't configure AWS, what is going to happen is not going to authenticate. That means that provider is not able to authenticate with AWS
AWS.
SDK. Then it can't provision those resources. It can't provision those resources. I hope you got it right. So then after you configure this, in this we are going to keep main.tf file. In that we need to keep the main.tf file. Okay, so come to here Terraform AWS tutorial. You just type this Terraform AWS tutorial. So now here you go to this. I'll share this in the chat also. Okay, so that everyone need to perform these. So how many tutorials we have? 6 tutorials, right? These tutorials you need to finish. So we need to install the Terraform also. Okay, so here we need to install the Terraform, and in that main.tf file, so here they created one directory called learn-terraform. So whatever the directory name you want, you can create. Then here we need to specify the main.tf block. So now here try to understand this. So now here we have this main.tf. In that we use the provider block. So this provider is AWS provider we are using, and before that we need to specify that the Terraform block also we can keep. So that we can keep in the terraform.tf or in the same file itself. This is going to tell, like in the Terraform initialization, like this provider version it need to download. So this provider version it need to download, and that provider version, what is the version of this? So from the HashiCorp AWS registry is downloading, and 5.92 is the version. And this 1.2 is there, right? That is the Terraform version. This 5.92 is
AWS provider.
provider version. Okay, so that's from where it's from the Terraform registry is going to download. And we are using that provider is AWS provider. And here we can specify the region. So now here in this, if I specify profile equal to like a default, what is that meaning? If I specify profile equal to default meaning, what is that meaning?
Default region.
No. In the AWS configuration, by default, if you configure, that goes to default profile. Even if you don't specify also, it is going to use the default credentials, default region itself. And in the AWS configure, I given one region. Here I specified US West 2. Then AWS CLI region it will take, or this region it will take. So if we are using Terraform, then that is going to use,
This region.
yeah, this from the Terraform, this region itself is going to use. Okay, then like the data source, I will explain. This is a simple block, right? What it is creating? What it is creating?
Instance.
An EC2 instance is getting created, and in that we are specifying that AMI instance type. So those all the details we are going to specify in that. Those all the specify. Okay, so that's we need to specify like this resource block. Okay, then this is going to tell like to download that provider version, and when this resource is getting created is when that resource is getting created is that resource is getting created when we do the Terraform apply is there. But plan will show these resources are getting created that shows only the summary kind of thing or blueprint of resources. Okay, so that blueprint of resources are getting created with that. Yeah, any doubts on this? Any doubts?
Main.tf file is a default file, or we need to create that file.
We need to create that.
Okay.
So in the directory, what is the directory is called as Terraform workspace, but till the time it's only a directory. But when we do the Terraform init, it is going to become a Terraform workspace. In that workspace, we are initializing that all those files.
Okay.
Okay. So like maybe like 5 years back, 6 years back, if you provision normally these resources, that is fine. But today, people have lot of expertise on the Terraform. Since we also need to get lot of things. Okay, say here we have like in the AWS we have these tutorials, right? Say install Terraform, create infrastructure, manage infrastructure, destroy infrastructure. Okay, say at least these 5 tutorials, whatever the steps. Say even in the job also we don't get the documentation steps more than this. So what is the capability we should have is from the documentation we should able to do those things. We should able to do those things need to handle in a better way. Okay, so I shared the 2 videos, right? So finish those videos. So tomorrow I'll perform this hands-on. But these 5, at least try to keep the efforts. I don't know what is the problem for you. Need to keep minimum 4 to 6 hours per day. Everyone need to keep the efforts. Otherwise you can't survive in the job. Okay, so finish those videos. And these 5 tutorials, at least try to keep some efforts. If you stuck, I'll help you. What is your expectation is the same video, I need to repeat it. There is no use with that. So we need to, so this session, try to use for more hands-on kind of things. And wherever you struck, I'll try to help there. Not again to repeat the same session. So all these days, maybe assume we have initial stages, but now onwards, everyone need to show something. Okay. So try to finish them. So you got this link, right?
Yes.
Okay. So these tutorials take on instance. Now here, like install Terraform on one mission. So how much time that is there? Only 7 minutes. Okay, so go to Linux, then install that. So this command, just you type it, that's it. If you got errors also, no problem. That is also part of learning itself. Okay. And parallelly try to do that AWS cloud formation also do it. After say client requirement, that is either they may go for cloud formation or Terraform. If they ask us, we need to tell
Both.
Terraform only. But both we need to show the POCs for the client.
Both.
And in Azure, we have the ARM templates. Okay. Okay, sure.